Like, oh, welcome to the puppy club. The puppy pandemic is like crazy.
We're getting chickens.
Oh, cute.
We have a quarter acre. And
Oh
so
my gosh.
we're like, we need to do something with this. So we're going to get chickens, a chicken coop. One of the conversations that I had on here was someone who does gardening. And so
Oh,
he
fun.
inspired me. So we're going to get the little chicks.
So fun.
So
Love
anyway,
it.
well, let's dive in.
Yeah.
And so today's topic for those watching is about fear, not letting fear drive. I want to just share that Sara and I worked together. Sara was my business coach, and I learned so much from her. And I know that you're going to get so much value from this conversation. So I'm so excited to talk about it. I wanted to start by, Sara, having you just tell everyone about who you are, what you do, and why the topic of fear is so important to you to get that message out to the world.
Yes. So I have a podcast called the Shameless Mom Academy. We're in the middle of an online event right now, which is why I have this like massive weird banner behind me. I have the Shameless Mom Academy is my podcast. I have a business built around that, which is multiple communities in which I serve moms. So before that, though, I had a gym. And so I had a gym very much like the fitness studio that Christina runs. And I had that business for 15 years. I didn't always have my own standalone facility during that time, but I was in the fitness industry for 15 years. So that's kind of where I come from, is serving primarily women in my fitness business, and then exclusively women in the Shameless Mom Academy, and serving women in transformation, accountability, evolution, growth, mindset, health, wellness, sociology, psychology, kind of all of those different fields, which are very interlinked and intertwined. And so I've been doing all that for like 17 years now, which makes me sound and feel older than I normally think I am. But it's been really, really amazing. And what's been interesting over the years, and especially during this time, is awareness around different emotions and awareness around uncomfortable emotions, and learning to embrace uncomfortable emotions and recognizing how important they can be for growth and for opportunity and for success, and no matter what success might look like for you. And so anytime we push ourselves into these uncomfortable places, the opportunity for growth just gets exponentially greater. And I think that I think there's a few emotions that women in particular really try to be avoidant of. I think anger is one of them. It's not like ladylike to be angry. It's not socially acceptable to be angry. I think that fear is another one. I think that we feel a lot of fear, but we don't talk openly about fear. And I think that what we're seeing right now is there's so much uncertainty. And so I know, in the communities of women that I have always attracted and built through my gym and through my podcast, I tend to serve a lot of women who are high achiever, type A, perfectionistic, kind of prone to anxiety type of women like myself. And I think that right now, the level of uncertainty is very uncomfortable. And I think that that contributes to ongoing fear and depressive symptoms, anxious symptoms. And so what I've really been working on as I've built businesses over the years is noticing fear and like saying hello to it, but not letting it drive my decisions. Because if I let it drive my decisions, then I don't take any action. And so what I've been doing for years leading up to this, and I'm especially doing right now, is noticing like, hey, fear, I see that you're here right here next to me to protect me, because fear is very important and is something that is intended to protect us and is necessary to protect us. But I'm not letting that fear drive. So I'm recognizing like, oh, there it is. It's always there to remind me like to not go, accidentally kill myself in an endeavor. But so I'm going to recognize it, be grateful for it, and then make decisions that allow me to move forward with it sitting beside me rather than letting it get ahead of me.
And I love that because I feel like so many women, myself included, when we work together, I often felt powerless to what goes on around me, especially being a business owner, an entrepreneur. Oh my goodness. When you talk about risk tolerance, it's hard to describe the amount of risk tolerance that you need when you're in that space. And so you're the first person who truly inspired me to become more of the CEO, which was really freaking scary. How many times did I basically break down on Marco Polo, like, hello? And it was fear. I think a lot of it was fear for me because I was shedding an old identity. And so I even outside of quarantine, sometimes fear is even just based around our identity, like who we are changing and
Totally.
shifting. And then suddenly we're
Yeah.
becoming this different person and we don't know if that's who we need to be, want to be, should
Mm-hmm.
be. And so I definitely think that I like how you're not trying to eliminate fear. You want
No.
to, like you said, sit there like in the seat versus
Mm-hmm.
trying to eliminate it. Because I know, and we worked through this together during our time together, when I feel like I'm trying to get rid of something, then I'm still trying to exert power over it. And
Mm-hmm.
by doing so, it just perpetuates the problem.
Right, right. And I want to touch on something you said that I think is so important, and I think we miss this so often, is that when you and I talked about like you taking on and really embracing being the CEO in your professional position and just the CEO of your life even, there's this sense of fear that comes with this title. And this has happened so many times when I've worked with women that I'll say to them, are you in the CEO role? Like, what do you do in your business, in your company, in your life, et cetera? What do you do? Okay, so based on everything you just told me that all of these things that you're doing make you the CEO by default. Like, you're doing what a CEO of any company would do. And when people hear that, that's super scary. All of a sudden, there's this like burden of, oh my gosh, but I'm not that. I'm not that qualified or that worthy to take on that title. Yet you're already doing all the things that qualify you to own that title. And so really it's just this shift in belief and semantics around it. And that is so big and scary for some people. And so I love that you brought up that example, because I think that that's where we women especially get in our way so much, is that we're already doing really big, powerful, scary things all the time and we don't own them. Instead, we either like stuff down the fear, or we dismiss or minimize how big our roles are, or how significant our impact is, or our decisions are, or how, you know, to the extent that we lead every day in multiple areas of our lives, we make that so small when the reality is it's really big. And if we can embrace how big it is, we get to step into a whole new level of power that really quiets the fear. Ultimately, it's nerve-wracking at the time, but it ultimately quiets the fear.
Well, and I also feel like if you're going to have anxiety, if you're going to be worked up, you might as well have that going towards something versus sitting stagnant. So if I'm going to have an energy that feels anxious simply because I don't know what's coming next, I'd rather that be productive than just sitting there like marinating in my fear.
Right, right. Yes, absolutely.
I love the quote too, that action alleviates anxiety. And so
Yes.
one thing I really took away from your talk on fear was that piece, was how taking action, taking ownership in and of itself alleviates anxiety. And I would love for you to maybe speak to that a little bit, because I know you've worked with so many women. I know you've gone through your own journey with anxiety and fear. What are your thoughts on that? Like, how and in what ways, maybe some examples where action can kind of alleviate some of the unknown and the fear and the working.
Yeah. So I learned, I don't know, probably, I think I was 38, 39. So 5 or 6 years ago. I learned that I've had anxiety my whole life. and which is like a weird thing to learn, like very strange thing to learn very late in life, not very late in life, but after so many years of managing it. And I learned this through an appointment I had with a sleep doctor. I was going to this doctor for sleep. I was having this awful bout of insomnia, which I've struggled with all my life, insomnia. So she's asking me all these questions. And she said, at what age, if you can track back throughout your life, at what age do you remember starting to be so hypervigilant? And I was like, at first I was kind of offended and defensive. Like, who does she think she is calling me hypervigilant? Like, that's just weird. And then I was like, oh my gosh, she completely nailed it. And so I could track it back to being 8 years old. Like, there was this shift that happened when I was 8. Things changed. I had this very irrational fear around burglars. And every single night I was convinced our house was being robbed. And I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would think that I heard the noises, and I would, like, the level of which I heard these noises and the whole thing was like very dramatic, very, very, I was very certain in my mind every single night that this was happening, and it never actually happened. So it was this whole big thing. And that's where this started for me, like this hypervigilance, worry, constant worry, anxiety that is carried through all the way until I'm sitting here talking with this doctor 30 years later. And so I had this, when she started talking through this with me, I realized, oh my gosh, I've had anxiety all this time, which was actually very freeing, because I could label all of the little idiosyncratic, oddities about myself that my friends were just kind of like, oh, that's Sara being neurotic again. And I was like, oh, now I know why. Like, this is such a relief. So in learning that about myself, I also had to learn, how can you do better with this instead of letting it be this thing that like that has power over you. And so the way it shows up for me, and always has, is waking up in the morning with a pit in my stomach. And so the way I counterbalance that is by having a morning routine that allows me to alleviate that anxiety. So action alleviates anxiety. For me, looks like getting up, writing out a to-do list. I call it an action list, 3 action items that will move the needle for me. So it's not a to-do list like check email, put the laundry in, call so-and-so. It's like 3 things that move the needle toward a goal. So that keeps me very focused on taking action in ways that will actually help me, grow my business or reach a goal in my family, whatever the case might be. Another thing that I do is I work out every single morning. And so for me, action alleviates anxiety. It's very much about motion. Motion processes emotion. And so I know that I have to work out 6 days a week. Like Sunday mornings, I sit in my pajamas and drink coffee. But other than that, I work out, move in some way to some degree. Sometimes it's 10 minutes, sometimes it's 30 minutes, but 6 mornings a week. So for me, that's what action alleviating anxiety looks like. The other thing is if I'm sitting, I think that one of the things that women really struggle with in decision making is analysis paralysis. And I think there's a lot of things that make this worse for us, like social media makes us compare ourselves to other people. Amazon reviews, these are crippling things for me. Like I'll go to make a purchase on Amazon and I will delay it for weeks because I'm busy reading reviews, trying to decide which is the best thing. And I use this example of when my son was really little, like trying to pick the best baby bottle nipples. And like, it took me 3 weeks. Like the kid just needed a bottle. And I was like, hold on, I got to read all the reviews for all the nipples. Like it's ridiculous. So for me, recognizing that I need to make decisions more quickly because being stuck in analysis paralysis creates a ton more anxiety. In trusting that no matter what the decision is that I make, that I will be able to make the next right step after that. So if I make a decision and then I'm like, oh, maybe that wasn't the best decision or the right decision, or I could have done it a little bit better, I can go back and fix that later. But to sit in analysis paralysis is so crippling and creates so much more anxiety and fear and stress that it's not worth it. And so those are a few ways that I really push myself into action. And that keeps me feeling in momentum versus feeling stuck in that really high anxiety place.
I love that. And I feel like so many dreams and ambitions get lost in the land of never starting. As we transitioned our business online, it's been the craziest thing I've ever done, ever. I'm sure you can imagine gym. Can you even imagine?
Like, I have been so relieved that I sold this whole time. I've been like, thank God I sold the gym when I did.
Yeah, it's been a lot, and we've pivoted and we've adapted so quickly. And I'm realizing that I have to just do it messy. These conversations are a great example. I've wanted to start podcasting in some capacity, having conversations with people. I waited 3 freaking years. And then all of a sudden I'm thrust into it and wanting to innovate and adapt. And suddenly I'm doing it, which shows me that I need to do that with like everything else.
Right. No, it's amazing how quickly we can react when we have to. It's mind blowing.
Should also teach us that we had that all along. It didn't just appear out of thin air. Like the ability to innovate and adapt and pivot and create was always there. We just, like you said, we stuffed it down, or we kind of like dimmed ourselves. We just went through the motions, which I think also is at least a little, I always talk about the patriarchy. I know you do too.
Oh, it's totally the yes. Amen.
I find that I totally agree with that. And I wanted to touch on something that you actually taught me that was so helpful. And I just think it applies to what you just said. And that is getting out of your current environment. I remember when you gave me that advice, because I am the kind of person who something will happen and I'll kind of stew over it and I'll think about it and I'll just sit there and marinate in my thoughts, and my blood pressure rises and I feel the anxiety symptoms of sweaty palms and all that. And no one ever makes good decisions from a place of panic and fear. We make the worst decisions and we make irrational decisions. And so you told me, whenever you feel that way or you're just uncertain, get out of your current environment. Go for a walk, go for a drive, go for a bike ride, walk around the neighborhood, and you'd be surprised at what maybe ideas pop into your mind. Maybe you run into like the perfect person that you needed to talk to get through whatever. And that really, really helped me, is getting out of your current environment. Because that, I would add that to like the list of action steps that someone can take when they're feeling.
Oh yeah.
So many people sit in this place of fear, and from a physiologic perspective, it's like our ancestors being chased by a tiger, except we're just sitting at our desk.
And then the chasing is just in our head, like frantic chasing in our head.
Yes. And then it leads to one thought, and then I know you have anxiety too. I'll have a thought, one thought, and then all of a sudden we're going out of business and the bridge. Right? Like that 100%. Literally start here and end there within like 5 minutes.
Oh yeah. Yeah. For sure. I know I'm a huge fan of changing your state. So when you're like stuck ruminating on something, and this also comes from years of working from home, and my husband and I have talked, who also used to work from home and now is back working at home, but we've talked about this at length. When you are someone who works for yourself and you work from home and you have so much alone time in your head, you get stuck in these like cycles where you can't snap out of it. And so you have to change your state. And so I love your examples of getting out, going for a walk, going for a drive. One of my big ones is like going to Trader Joe's, because at the very least, a checker is going to engage you in conversation, but you're probably also going to like run into someone else in your neighborhood or community. And so that always, like, that sounds like the most ridiculous thing. Just go to Trader Joe's when you're feeling anxious. But for me, it's like, it's a little bit of social interaction to like snap me out of whatever weird loop I'm in my head. And it's just a far enough drive from my house that I can like change my state, get a breath of fresh air, get a little perspective, come home, sit down, and be ready to go again.
Well, and especially now, I just went there today, and it's an event to go to the grocery.
Oh, such an event.
And it's so justified that when I go to buy 2 things, I can be gone for an hour and hubby's not you. It's like, oh, I'm at Trader Joe's and I'm waiting in line for 15
minutes. You're like hoping the line, I hope this line's super long.
I literally bring a book sometimes. I'm like,
yes.
And just reading in line. So I have not hated that part.
Right.
Because it forces you to slow down.
Yeah.
Because so often I'm just going all the time and I kind of get stuck in autopilot. So I've actually been enjoying. I just went today and the line was and I was like, this is great.
Yeah, no, I've actually been enjoying my grocery time too. And I'm also gone for a very long time.
Oh gosh. So I want to talk a little bit too about hurdles, because I know you faced so many hurdles on the way to discovering that you had anxiety, but also with just conquering fear and learning to sit with fear. And I know you work with so many women. What do you think are some of the triggers for people when it comes to them getting in a super fearful state, if that makes sense, where they kind of just feel frozen and like incapable of action? Because that's something a lot of women deal with, is they have the tools, right? They're listening to us. We're giving them so many great things, but there's going to be those things that really trigger them. And I'm curious, what are some of those things, and maybe like an example or two of how you had helped someone move past that.
So I think that's such a great question. And I think that the 2 things that come to mind first are when we're faced with doing something that's unfamiliar or unknown. So I think that definitely can lead to fear. Like, I've never done this before, and what if I can't do it? Or what if I can't do it in a way that makes me look amazing and smart and powerful and what have you? Or what if I just can't do it at all? So I think there's that. It's just that fear of the unknown and not knowing what to expect. I also think the fear can be really triggered by things that are similar or connected or related to situations in the past where we've either had failure or trauma.
Yes.
And I should put failure in quotes, because I think failure is all about perspective, but in our minds, we've experienced failure and or trauma. And so then to have to revisit something or visit something that is similar to something from the past, I think can bring up a ton of fear. And I think those are both very justifiable reasons that fear would show up. But I think, so that's where I think we have to look at, like, okay, here's something that I've never done before. And I can use my example last year. A year ago today was Shameless Mom Con 2019. The first time I did a big live event for moms. I was terrified because I had never done anything like this before. I had all these women flying into Seattle who had never met each other. I felt very responsible for if they had a good time, if they made new friends, if I delivered amazing content, if my speakers delivered amazing content. Like there was just so much that I was fearful of and worried about and very, very anxious about. I was also excited, but I was so nervous because I'd never done this before. And the people around me that had done it, my mentors had done it in such a great way that I was like, how do I even begin to do what they've done? And what I realized was literally within 20 minutes of that event starting was, oh, I was made for this. I had no idea, but I was made for this. But I only would learn that by doing it. And I think that's where we have to learn by doing. And so I think, in a fitness environment, this comes up all the time where we see something new and we're like, oh, I could never do that. I could never do a 5K or a half marathon or a triathlon or a burpee or push-ups on my toes or deadlift my body weight. Like there's so many things that come up. And the only way you find out is by trying. And sometimes you're going to totally fall flat on your face. And so, I've really learned to be like, I'm cool if I fall flat on my face. That's okay. And I'll figure it out when that happens,
That is so interesting that you mentioned that, because I was just talking to someone about this. So I created a modification guide for one of our programs because some people are starting at different levels, and online it's a little bit different than when you can coach them in person. And the number one thing I told her was, you have to be okay with doing what you're doing and not focusing on what everyone around you is doing, which
totally
in the gym, but in life. Although I do find it interesting how what we do in our workouts totally applies to life. So
yes,
I have a badass workout, I'm going to go ahead and like take on the world now, right? Like,
yes.
I feel like so many women can tap into their power by way of their workout. Even realize it, but it's like, who just like gets up and starts their day with burpees? Like that's not like normal in a good way.
Right.
It's like,
right.
So, and I was telling her, I said, because she said, well, do you think I could do the workout modified? I'm like, you could do the workout modified if you're okay and you can like get out of your own head and you're not trying to like compare yourself to the people that have been here for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Absolutely, you can do it modified. So yeah, like be okay with falling flat on your face. And that's another thing I took away from working with you was I don't want to say I give less F's. But I do, in terms of like, I just don't worry about every little step as much, because what matters to me is starting. And then what's cool is on the way there, I find people and resources, and like it kind of pieces itself together, almost like a little mosaic, right? Like coming into frame.
Right. So, I think a really important piece of that too is that you can be less concerned with failure if you know who you really are and you know your core values. And so I can be less concerned with falling flat on my face if I know that no matter what happens, like I'm going to do my very best to show up in high integrity. So there's a very specific situation I'm thinking of right now where I really hurt someone's feelings, and it was completely not intentional on my part, but I missed the mark for sure. And I felt awful. I feel awful. And I thought, like, there's nothing I can do to unhurt this person's feelings except for apologize. This person's not super open to my apology. And I thought the only way that I can do this is to do what I always do and show up with total transparency, be really honest, apologize, and then try to do right, like, and changing and fixing what I can. And I did all those things really, really quickly, and I cannot stand being in those situations. Like if I think I've done something wrong or hurt someone or whatever, I mean, going back to like type A, perfectionistic, control freak, like that's not a good feeling. It's the worst feeling. But also I think it's really good practice in the sense that it immediately pushes me into who am I and how do I show up, and how do I show up when I screw up? And if I know who I am and I know how to immediately say like, oh, holy cow, I totally did this wrong, and I can see how you're hurt. Like that's not a fun experience, but it is a valuable experience to know how to own your mistakes and to know how to, I really practice owning my mistakes publicly. And like, I'm talking about this right now, owning my mistakes publicly, because I think it only adds to my integrity and it only helps me build trust as a leader in bigger ways. And so I think that if you know who you are, it's less scary to fall flat on your face because you also know what you will do to redeem yourself or what you will do to fix things, because you know that that's a part of who you are as well.
Yeah. It's like you're almost operating, you know that you're less breakable. It's like your foundation is stronger. One thing you said that I really wanted to try and draw out and kind of dive into, I'm curious what you think about so we hear core values all the time, right? Our
Mm-hmm.
values and like who we are as a inside and who we are as a person. I find that for myself, that kind of developed. In fact, when I became more entrepreneur, business
Oh
minded,
yeah,
oh, that like accelerated it by about 15,000 years.
totally.
Do you think, I don't know about you, but I have yet to meet someone in our world that doesn't constantly consume and try to get better, which is cool, but it's kind of funny. Like you won't meet nerds like us until you start your own business.
Right. No, it's very entrepreneurial to like know your core values and be reading personal development books and all these things.
And I have to, I told you this too, like some days I have to like not consume content because it's
Yes.
supposed to be my day off. And then I'm learning about how to start an online course. And I'm like,
Right.
off. That's just
Yes.
like kind of on, kind of off. But I am curious, what are your thoughts on how we develop our core values over time? Because
Mm,
I know for a lot of people, if they could stand in that, that would be such great armor for them. But yet I know a
yeah.
lot of people kind of struggle with like, well, what are my core values? How do I develop them? Where do I find them? Are they just like in this random pocket that I'm not sure of?
Right.
What do you think? I'm just curious because I think that's such a great message is if people can, even like an exercise that they could do at some point to try and develop
Yeah.
what those values are.
So you can get like you can literally Google like list of core values or core value words or something like that. So I actually did an exercise at an event a few years ago. A good friend of mine was leading this event, and she gave everyone a stack of like 42 core values, and we had to narrow it down to our top 5.
Ooh, that's a good idea.
I could not, I was literally in tears because I couldn't do it. And I was like, no, I need 6. And she said, no, you need to, like, this is a good exercise in discernment. You're allowed to have 5. So it was very, very hard. Because whenever you take one thing on, you're like saying no to something else. So if I say yes to like success being a core value, but then I say like no to, I don't know, faith or I don't know, friendship or whatever. Like you're doing this prioritization that is so hard. But at the end of it, you have a lot of clarity around what really, really matters. And so, and you question yourself, it pushes you to ask yourself a lot of questions. I remember I kept being drawn, one of the core values was wealth. And I kept being really drawn to that for one of mine. And I was like, does that make me really bad? Like, do I really want wealth to be one of mine? But then I started thinking through, and I was able to think through like, well, I came from a place where money was scarce and there was a lot of focus on scarcity. And so for me, wealth, while there's a connection to money, it's also really connected to security. So I actually ended up shifting my words. I pulled wealth out and I added security in because I was able to look deeper and see really it's not the wealth that I want the security that comes with wealth because there was some things that were not so secure in my upbringing growing up. So it was a really interesting exercise. I think you can do it in a ton of different ways, but I think that one of the really valuable ways is just like literally downloading a list of core values, print it out, and then just like cross off the ones where you're like, nope, nope, and see if could you narrow it down to 5 and what would those 5 be? And I think that's a really great starting point. I also think I've had clients do this as an activity. I did this with my business and leadership mastermind last fall, and they did core values in different areas of their life. And so they did like family core values, professional core values, business core values, like I think we did 3 different sets of them. But what was really cool was to see the difference between like family versus professional, because those look different. And I remember one woman in particular, she was like, our family core values are like around like, reducing plastic waste and quality time, family date night or date nights with my husband and I, and then like family dates as well. It was really cool to see how she kind of laid things out. So you can also do it in kind of different capacities of your life, which I think can make a ton of sense because, putting things like wealth and success for your family, that might not be your family values, but there's going to be a ton of overlap. And so for me, I know mine always go back to like integrity, compassion, kindness. I actually have them up on my wall. Independence is a big one for me. Security. So I have security, success, integrity, independence, love, and compassion are the ones from that day that I was only supposed to pick 5 and I ended up putting 6 on. So I picked 5 to like present to the group. And then when we drew them out on a sheet of paper, I was like, I'm putting 6 on here. And so I think love was my 6th one. I was like, who can leave love off? But now that becomes a filter. And I've reframed these in different ways for my multiple businesses over the years. But what's great about having these core values is they become a filter through which I can make a decision. And so when I fail, or when I have to decide between option A and option B, I can look at, okay, the next right step, or the option between A and B, if I run it through my core values as a filter, which one makes the most sense? Which one is right for me? And so that becomes way more clear. So in the situation that I just shared about, like, I screwed up, I really hurt someone's feelings, I didn't mean to, I felt horrible, I didn't know how to fix it. I can look at my core values and be like, okay, but compassion is one of my core values. So when I go to try to fix this, I'm going to lead with compassion and say, like, I completely understand how this felt horrible to you. And I see now how I messed up in these ways. And I see how that was painful to you and that was hurtful to you. And there was an erosion of trust. That's all compassion. That is really hard to own all of that. But I know that if I'm someone who leads with compassion, that's necessary. It can't just be like, well, I'm sorry, but things have been really chaotic lately and I screwed up. Like, that's not a compassionate response. And so knowing that that's my core, that one of my core values is compassion, I had to really look at, from her perspective, how did my decision impact her and how did it make her feel? And how can I own that I made a decision that made you feel this way, and I can see how that happened, and I'm willing to take responsibility for that. And then I can say, I'm so sorry. Things have been so unpredictable right now that I just didn't think this thing through all the way, and I didn't see it through your eyes when I made this decision, and I screwed up. And that makes an apology very different.
Not as fearful of confrontation, except
Right.
because you know that you are honoring your core values versus just trying to be right, or
Right.
trying to somehow control the narrative or the dialogue.
Right.
It's
Right.
like genuinely coming from a place of wanting to adhere to your core values. And what
Yeah.
you said reminded me of something. So as you know, I was a corporate banker for 13 years. And one thing that was always drilled into my head, not necessarily from my company, but just from any kind of sales training I did, was that you are your brand, that you take yourself and
Yeah.
you go to another company and you are your own brand. You're going to take that with you from place to place. So, and this is so true, I still use certain things that I learned even as a business owner from the bank. And so I like that when you have these core values, any situation you find yourself in, you can exercise those core values. And there's no
Yeah.
power in that, because then you stand alone in terms of, like, there's no outside force that really controls you.
Right.
And that just reminded me of that, because as a salesperson, you know, people go from company to company, and a lot of people that feel dependent on their company, they don't go very far because it's like they're stuck. And I feel like if you really adhere to who you are and to your core values, then you're really only dependent on yourself, which is like the perfect thing.
Right.
A lot. I feel like
Yeah.
that's something tangible that a lot of working moms too could take, because it's like a similar concept. Your core values follow you. Your core values,
Absolutely.
no matter whatever situation you happen to be in. And I'm totally going to do that exercise, because I think I could narrow it down to maybe 10.
It's really hard. It's really hard to say no. Like, you're like, but all four, I mean, because things that are like kindness, respect, you're like, how do I say no to that? Like, of course that's important to me. So it's really creating this like hierarchy. I had to do it in groups and be like, okay, I'm going to go from like 40 to 20, and then I'm going to go down to 10, you know?
Right. And I guess also note and being okay with the fact that saying no to something doesn't mean that you don't care for it. It just means
Yes.
you have these other ones that come before it.
Yes.
That's,
And I think there's things that can go together. So like for my thing around like wealth and security, I was like, okay, these for me, maybe not for everyone, but for me, these two are actually really intertwined. So how can I put one in front of, pick one over the other? Because in picking one, I'm essentially picking both. They mean very similar things to me.
we have such a similar trigger there. I feel like you know everything about me. So everything I say, I have to preface with, you already know this. But as you know, I also have a scarcity mindset, which has gotten so much better. And a big part of it was from my childhood. And I too used to write things like, I want to be a 7-figure entrepreneur, or I would write down a number like, oh, I want to be this number.
Yeah.
And one day I realized I actually don't care about the amount. I care about the security, and I call it freedom. And so the fear that I feel around this has everything to do with not feeling financially secure, or worrying that at some point I won't be financially secure. And when I shifted it did help. When I shifted the narrative and I stopped obsessing over like the minute details, because then I can be happy with a lot of alternate realities that I might not have considered. If you only care about like that $1 million, then
Right.
that's the only thing that's going to make you happy versus, well, what if you went down this path and you only made like 500,000, but you're really happy and your expenses are low and
Yeah. And I think that that's such a great point, that when we have sometimes, and this is so true, there's such a great parallel here in the fitness world, when we have metric based goals, that can be a great thing. And also it can lead us to thinking that we have not been successful when we've been so successful. And so if we look at like, okay, I want to be a 7-figure earner in 2020, and then we only hit $700,000, then you're like, well, I guess this year didn't count. And the reality is, like, did you have time freedom? Did you go on vacation 3 times with your family? Did you eat dinner with your family every night? Like, whatever is important to you, did you do all those things that were made possible by whatever you did earn? And that's what's really important. And I think back to the fitness space, I remember forever I had a goal around pull-ups. I still can't do pull-ups to save my life. I finally decided my arms are too long. But forever I had this goal around it, and I constantly felt like such a failure around pull-ups. And I hired one of my trainers I was like, Steve, you got to help me out. Like, what am I doing wrong? He put me like on a pull-up program. And the thing is, the perseverance and tenacity with which I went after this, that's what counts. That's the win, right? Same thing like doing a half marathon. The first half marathon I ever did changed my life. It was amazing. It was such a transformative experience. And then every one I did after that, I only was excited about it or felt like it was a quote unquote win if my time was faster than the previous one I had done. And when that's the metric, when you're always looking at this number thing, then you miss so much, because then I couldn't have a win around just like, that was my 14th half marathon. No, instead it was like, well, but you were 2 minutes slower than the last one, so I guess you better sign up for another one to do better. And so we get so, especially again, type A perfectionistic control freak kind of people, we get really caught up in these like really specific metrics, and then we use them as an excuse to dismiss the actual wins because we think that the metric is the only win.
oh my gosh, yes. And I all the time with the scale, all
Yes.
the time. Well, my pants are fitting looser. I have more muscle. I feel better than I ever have, but the scale didn't go down, so I'm a loser.
Right.
That is the narrative that people have. Thankfully, it's starting to shift a little bit. Like diet culture is starting to like go down a different path, which I love, because I have my clients do this thing every week where they do 10 weekly wins. And I intentionally tell them, I do not want to hear more than 2 or 3 that are like body based. Everything
Love that.
needs to be empowerment and mental health and what are you doing for you? That has been a game changer. I had one client do it and she was like, I'm actually doing pretty good. She's like, when I wrote that list, it surprised me. And so I completely agree. And I think it's like, yeah, you could totally run that marathon and be like, well, I didn't beat my time, so the marathon doesn't count.
Yeah.
The training you did, let alone that you ran a marathon, when people run a marathon. But
exactly.
your time by 2 minutes. So I think that is just so profound. And if people only take that away from this conversation, please know that all the little things that you do, they matter and they add up and they're important. And yeah, because I think women need to hear that message more than ever, because we also are kind of in this competitive space as women, right? Where we feel like we need to do it better, bigger, faster, stronger, versus, well, why don't we do it our way with our audience and like how it connects? I know I struggle with that sometimes too, or like women place, they feel like they need to be somehow better or whatever it is to be able to match up and compare. So time has flown by, and I wanted to touch on just a couple things before we end. And I wanted to speak a little bit to quarantine, because your episode on fear spoke a little bit to that. And I thought that would be really good for us to hone in on that just a little bit. So people right now, and I don't know if you agree with this, I would say their top fears are definitely like money related, routine related, and just like fear of the unknown, like health related maybe would be another way to say it.
Yeah.
What are some things that you think someone could do? I always like to kind of end with some actionable strategies so that people can leave thinking, okay, I can at least start implementing these and I can get to a better headspace. on a daily basis during quarantine in specific to get themselves to a better place, right? Like get their vibration to a place where it needs to be to call forth that abundance that they want. That was a little woo-woo, but because I'm
I
curious,
like it.
and I know you're in quarantine too. Like, what are
Mm-hmm.
the things that you've been doing? I know you shared exercise and some of the other things. What if someone's even struggling with that? Like, what do
Yeah.
you recommend?
Yeah. So I think first of all, really recognizing and being clear around there's a whole bunch of things right now I can't control. And that's really hard. And also there's a whole bunch of things you can control.
Mm.
And so embracing, like, here's all the things I do get to control rather than focusing on, I don't know what job security looks like. I don't know what, my family's health looks like. I don't, for me, my mom is 82. I'm like, and she wants to do, she's like, I'm just going to go to Joann's and get some new fabric for the blah, 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 which I'm like, Mom, it's non-essential. So like, I can't control her, right? I can yell at her. I'm now known in my family and extended family as the CDC police because I'm trying to control everyone. But so what can we control? What can we not control? And when you look at what you can control, all of a sudden you're like, oh, there's actually a whole bunch of things here I can't control, which can kind of ease our minds. So I think there's that piece. I also think that looking at what's not working and what is working. And so I actually had my members, I have a membership community, and my members did this as an activity a couple of weeks ago. And they were so surprised when they looked at their list of what's working, because we immediately think of all the things that are not working, because I work specifically with moms. So they're thinking about homeschooling and distance learning. And they're like, oh, here's 1 million things that are not working. But then when they look at what is working, they're able to identify like more family time than we've ever had, family game night, more walks with the dog, like all of these other things. And it was very eye-opening for them to see, oh, all of these things actually are working. So noting what's working and what's not working. And then what in there can you control versus what you can't. Another piece of this, and this is somewhat specific to moms, I think, but noting when and how you get personal time. So the biggest challenge for me during this time, and you probably can relate, is that I don't have any personal time. I mean, I'm like, this is my personal time right now because I've had to tell my child, go watch a show and eat chocolate chips so that I can have personal time and do an interview. And I know.
Quietly, in case Shem hears me, because I don't want him to know that I gave Sati chocolate to bribe her, so she would be good.
Right. So I think that we need to have personal time.
Right now, just in case anyone's listening. I was like, that sounds like I just put my 2-year-old on the couch. Anyway, keep going.
She's just out in the front yard by herself. So having personal time, and I didn't recognize it. It took me a few weeks to recognize that like that was the missing link for me that was really not working. And so I've built in personal time in different ways. So I get up in the morning and I do my morning routine. My son has been following me down the stairs every morning, like no matter how quietly I try to go. So I'm very clear with him. You can come downstairs with me, but you may not make noise. And if you make noise, you have to go into another room, because all he wants to do is sit and sing to the dog while I'm like doing my plan for the day and getting ready for my workout. And it drives me crazy. So I get personal time then. At the end of my morning routine, like there's a handful of things I do, but I've built in the time when I used to take him to school from like 8 to 8:20. I now go for a walk by myself. Maybe I take the dog. Like once every third day, I'll take the dog with me, but I go for a walk because it's like I get out of my house at a time of day that's hectic and chaotic. And my husband typically then will get him set up. He has like this little video he has to watch from his teacher every morning. So my husband will get my son set up with that video, and that's like 15 minutes long. So he does that while I go take a walk. And again, it lets me have a little bit of personal time to figure out, okay, like here's what I'm going to do for the day. And that personal time is actually like a total treat. I don't use that for like listening to podcasts on personal development. I use it for listening to podcasts about celebrity gossip, or like, it's like totally fun time for me. And then I'm also, oftentimes at the end of the day, getting in like another 20 minutes of personal time, because I've been spending a lot of time during the day with my child sitting next to me while I'm running my business, which is a huge challenge mentally and for my patients. But, so at the end of the day, I'm taking like another 20 minutes, whether I'm either getting on my Peloton for 20 minutes or I'm taking another 20-minute walk. It's something where I'm like headphones on, nobody gets to come in and I'm not working. And I'm not doing chores. So it's either like another walk, Peloton. Again, for me, motion processes emotion. I mean, not just for me, that's for everyone, but I know that works for me. And then also getting personal time on the weekends. My husband and I just kind of talked this through last week, where he was like, if I take Vinny for a bike ride, why don't you do nothing? Because I was complaining. I was like, I don't have any time to watch my shows. Like usually I get to watch a show at lunchtime, but right now I'm having lunch with my kid who I'm not going to watch Real Housewives with them. So he was like, when I take him out on the weekend for a bike ride or a walk or to play, he's teaching a 7-year-old how to play golf right now, which is hilarious. He's like, why don't you just like watch one of your shows, which I did last weekend. And I was like, oh my God, this is heaven to just lay on the couch and watch a show by myself. So building in that personal time, I think, is a big, big deal right now for moms. And for non-moms, I think some non-moms have an abundance of personal time, and others are still giving all of their time to work and extended family and all Zoom calls and Zoom happy hours and like a million different things. So I would say that goes for non-mom people as well, if you're a giver of time.
I call that small pockets of bliss. And I've been doing that myself in the morning. I'm a freak. I wake up super early, like 5 a.m. I work from about 5:30 to 7:30. And then a couple of days a week from 8 to 9, I get an hour of time to just like journal, read. I oftentimes sip on my latte and watch YouTube videos about nothing. And it really makes a difference.
Oh, it makes such a difference.
I'm a mess the rest of the day.
Yeah.
I'm more snappy at Sati, which then I feel terrible about as a mom, right? And like it clearly had not filled my cup on those days. So
and it gives you something to look forward to. I think that you need to know that, like, okay, at 4:00, I'm going to get 20 minutes, or on Saturday at 2, or whatever.
Because she's at an age where she's super, I don't want to say clingy, but she is, and she loves her mommy and I love her, but I need my time to decompress, because then I can show up as the best version of mommy for her. And even her child, I mean, he's 7.
Yeah. 7.
But that has its own set of challenges, because they're becoming their own person. They have very defined needs and wants, and that's like a whole different ballpark. So, and even if you're not a mom, so many people I talk to, they're on work calls all day. They're like out. They do not want to do anything other than not be on the computer.
Right.
So I love all of these action strategies. Is there anything else you would add, or would you say those are the kind of
those are the big ones that are working for me? I just recorded my episode from Monday, and I'm talking on that episode about, I talk a lot about personal time, and I also talk about building belief, and which is another thing I'm talking about in my membership community, but building belief around like, we can do this. You can flip your life upside down and come out strong on the other side. It's okay to, so with building belief, part of what I talked about is vision over strategy. So having a vision of like, what do you want your days to look like right now? What do you want summer to look like? Like, this is becoming a big thing for me as a parent, because summer camp is probably going to be canceled on top of school being canceled. So I'm like, what do I want summer to look like? So creating some vision and building belief around things can look nothing like what I thought they were going to look like in this phase of life and in 2020. And also, I can still make them great, or we can still make them great as a family, or I can still make it great as a business owner. So I think that spending some time building belief, creating a vision for yourself, which for me comes from those quiet times when I'm in personal time that I start thinking about those things, that helps a ton as well. And so that takes like getting quiet and doing some of the personal development work and the journaling, or the, walking and listening to music versus celebrity gossip.
But we all need that. I will admit, I started watching the Bachelor Nation show, Listen to Your Heart. And it's so bad that it's good. And I watch it, and literally I had the thought, I'm ashamed of myself. And I couldn't stop watching. So,
I love it.
The perfect time. I'm really curious to see what happens to TV and movies in about 3 months, because everything we're seeing now is from a few months ago. So is there like a desert of movies and
right. Oh, I'm very concerned about Real Housewives, because they have had to stop production. So I don't know what's going to happen.
Outside or something, it's going to be really uncomfortable. I don't know if I'm going to be able to handle this. So.
I know.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
To come on, and I love everything that we talked about today, especially ending with those action steps, because I just love to give people tangible advice. I think that in today's age, they're dealing with so much decision fatigue. So it can be really helpful to have like, here's just a checklist of what you can do every day to feel better.
Yeah.
I want everyone to know about you and be able to find you. Even if
Yeah.
you're not a mom, I want to just make that very clear. Even if you're not a mom, you will get so much value from Sarah's podcast. I legit look forward to it when it pops up on my feed.
Oh,
I have this routine where I go on a bike ride with baby and then I listen to your podcast and a couple others. And it just, I don't know, it's always something that I needed to hear. It's like you're in my head. So can you tell us where we can find you and
yeah.
places to find you?
Yeah. So I love it that thank you for sharing that. And thank you so much for having me. This has been a ton of fun. And I love that you pointed out that the show is also appropriate for non-moms, because I get people all the time. I've had dads who are like, is it okay if I'm listening? Or non-parents who are just like, this is just great. So I know I have a lot of female listeners who are not moms, because the content, there's references to motherhood, but it's actually content it's personal development for moms. So it's about like stepping into your power and walking away from shame and not letting fear drive, all that kind of stuff. So you can find the show, the Shameless Mom Academy, on any podcast platform. So wherever you listen to podcasts, you can also go to shamelessmom.com and listen to it right from our website. And then if you are a mom, this is exclusively for moms. We have an online community of moms, a Facebook group. If you go to shamelessmom.com/Facebook, and there's a few thousand moms in there. And that's a really amazing place to connect with other moms and just have a little bit more of a sacred, secure place to have conversations with other moms. And so I would invite anyone who wants to come join us there is more than welcome to do so.
Yay. Awesome. Thank you again. And I can't
Thank you so much.
everyone.